Welcome to the Eddie Hyde podcast. I'm so glad to be back with you this morning as we continue our journey through the book of Acts in this series that we're calling Life Changing Lessons from the book of Acts. And we are in chapter 16. And in our last episode, we got over to the area of chapter 16 and beginning down around verse 16, where there was a young woman who was possessed with a false prophetic spirit. Paul cast out the spirit, and she was a slave girl raking in a lot of money for her masters, telling people's fortunes, giving them psychic readings. You know, it's interesting. There's a sign right here in Grapevine, Texas, here in the Bible Belt, on more than one corner, a large, colorful sign, psychic readings, and gives a phone number. And so, yeah, there are false prophetic spirits like that, but then there are false prophetic spirits also in the church today that we have to be aware of and alert to. Um, so Paul cast out the spirits. She could no longer tell people's fortunes. Her masters were enraged, and they dragged Paul and Silas before the city magistrates there in Philippi, this pagan city. And I'm going to start reading at verse 20. It says, "And they brought them," that is, Paul and Silas, "to the magistrates and said, These men, being Jews, exceedingly trouble our city." Isn't it interesting? The people who had exactly what they needed to bring joy, to bring happiness and hope, but yet they're accused of exceedingly trouble our city. And so Jesus said, "Think it not strange if the world hates you." So, my friends, living in this present fallen world as a follower of Jesus Christ, you can expect to experience persecution. Um, it's and they accuse them of verse 21 of teaching customs which are not lawful for us, being Romans, to receive or observe. Then the multitude rose up. Well, a multitude rose up against them. Uh, and um, uh, and and with the magistrates they tore off their clothes and commanded them to be beaten with rods. And when they had laid many stripes on them, they threw them in the prison, commanding the jailer to keep them securely. The King James and the New King James says, "When they laid many stripes on them." We lose something with the way they've translated that word as stripes, because in my mind, a stripe, I would think of kind of a red welt or something, but the word means wounds. When they had laid many wounds upon them, they were wounded, they were bleeding, they were bloody, they were bruised. And when they had laid many wounds upon them, they threw them into the prison, commanding the jailer to keep them securely. Verse 24 says, "Having received such a charge, he put them in the inner prison." I understand modern prisoners today, they would call this the hole. Um, the area where they keep the really bad and violent criminals. They put them in the inner dungeon, in the inner prison, and fastened their feet in stocks. Now, can you picture Paul and Silas? Here they are. They have been publicly humiliated and beaten. And now it says they thrust them. I mean, they were treating them roughly, and they put them in the inner prison. Uh, I guess what you would call, there's a word for it in modern, isolated confinement. The hole. There are different words, modern words today, and then they put their feet in, stretched their legs apart, put their feet in stock so that they couldn't move. And here they are. Now, think about this for a moment. If I had been Silas, I might have been tempted to say, "Hey, Paul, let's talk about that vision you said we had, that you told us you had about coming to this place. Paul, are you sure that vision was from God? Paul, wasn't that That the night you ate that big pizza? My friends, the point I am making is just because God sends you to a place doesn't mean that everything is going to be nice and rosy and smooth and that everyone is going to love you. Yes, Paul and Silas, they have come to Philippi based on a supernatural, God given vision. But yes, yet this is the reception they are receiving. But here's something I want you to know. If you are a true follower of Jesus, and if he knows he can trust you, he will send you to places to take his word, places where he knows that you are going to experience opposition and you're going to experience pain. But 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 he loves us, but he's not like an expression we use growing up, tied to your mother's apron strings. In other words, he is not an overprotective parent. Yes, he loves us, but if he can trust us, he will send us into places to share the good news of the gospel, places where he knows that we're going to experience some pain. But here's the thing, the pain is only temporary because it's for the greater glory, and I've often asked myself in reading this, I've read this many times, why didn't God deliver them before they were beaten? Why didn't God intervene? And here's something I'll just share with you. Maybe you haven't seen God's deliverance. Maybe God didn't come through when you wanted him to, and things have gotten worse in their situation, and perhaps it is in yours. It's for the greater glory of God. God is not going to deliver them before they're beaten. He's not going to deliver them before they're jailed, but he's going to deliver them in a situation that is going to bring the greatest glory to him. And so, uh, I'm sure that most of you listening, they're familiar with this story. How did they respond? Now, here's the thing. Here's what's going to make the difference in your life. How do we respond to the difficulties that come our way in life? How do we respond? Do we respond getting angry with God, getting angry with life, getting frustrated, losing our cool, getting depressed, discouraged, throwing in the towel, giving up hope, giving up faith? How we respond is going to make all the difference in the world. Notice how Paul and Silas responded to the situation. Verse 25 says, "But at midnight, in the middle of the night, with their backs beaten and bruised, their feet in stocks in the inner dungeon, but at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing praises or hymns to God." Wow. What an incredible response. Oh, my friends, let's take a lesson from Paul and Silas. But at midnight, this is how they responded to a very tragic, disturbing, troubling situation. But at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Somebody was listening to them. There were other prisoners there. Now, they were there because of real crimes they had committed. And so Paul and Silas, they're not doing this quietly under their breath. No, they're praying and they're singing praises to God out loud, maybe at the top of their voices. And the prisoners were listening to them. And can you imagine what was going through these other prisoners' minds? They must have thought, man, these are the strangest people we have ever seen in this place. They're praying and they're singing. Wow, here in the middle of night, and we saw them brought in. They had really been misused and abused and beaten. But at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. And then, my friends, it is this point that God decides. I'm gonna pull back the curtains of heaven. Now is the moment I am going to intervene. And my friends, God has those moments those divine what I call kairos moments, because kairos is a Greek word that means time, but it's not a chronological time that you get by looking at your watch or looking at your phone, but it is a set time determined by God to work and act. And God has those kairos times for our lives when he pulls back the windows, the curtains of heaven, and he comes down and he breaks through into our lives. Oh, I just feel like somebody today, you're ready for that, for God to break through into your life, to open the windows of heaven and come down into your situation. And so verse 26 says, suddenly, God doesn't always come when we want him to, but there are those suddenlies in life. When he does decide to move, he doesn't mess around. It doesn't take him all day. Verse 26, suddenly there was a great earthquake, and the foundations of the prison were shaken. And we'll comment on more on this tomorrow. I believe that what was happening outwardly was a outward picture of what was happening spiritually. It says the foundation of the prison was shaken. And I believe that the foundation of Satan's prison house, of Satan's spiritual kingdom, was being shaken in Philippi right then and now. Right then and there. And we know there was a powerful church established there in Philippi, and the jailer and his family all came to Christ a little later, because Paul later wrote a letter, and it's actually his most affectionate letter of all his letters to the Christians, to the church there in Philippi. Well, listen, I'm going to stop right there, but let me encourage you today. No matter what you're going through, guard your heart, guard your response, guard your heart, my friends. As a proverb says, guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. And guard the faith, guard the hope. Don't lose faith, don't lose hope. Keep your eyes upon Jesus, and even follow the pattern of Paul and Silas. Go ahead, begin to pray out loud, and begin to praise and sing hymns and praises to God aloud. God has a breakthrough for you today as well. Hey, this is Eddie Hyatt. I look forward to seeing you next time. Check out my website, eddiehyatt.com, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. God bless.